Overlord Volume 6 Chapter 9 Jaldabaoth Part 1 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 4th day 2110 Feeling thirsty, the woman stirred lazily from her slumber. She squirmed slowly on her king-sized double bed, and reached out for the pitcher of water by the bed, but the fingers only found air. It was then that she remembered that she had not set out a jug of water, and she clicked her tongue. Hua! She could not stifle her yawn. She slept like an old person, early to bed and early to rise, but she had only gone to bed just over an hour ago. She had not yet slept her fill. The woman swallowed and placed a hand on her throat. There was a dry, sticky sensation there, and she got off the bed to get a drink of water. She threw on a long, thick robe to cover her nude body, slid her feet into a pair of slippers, and exited the room. This was her, Hilma, head of the drug trafficking division's home base in the royal capital. Logically speaking, there should have been dozens of lackeys bustling about, but the interior was now dead silent, like it was empty. Surprised, Hilma walked to the corridor. This mansion was always quiet when there were no nobles around, but this was too quiet. She invited nobles to this place in order to build connections and relationships. Among nobles, even legitimate heirs would need to wait a long time before they could succeed the family estate. It was quite common for them to only do so after the age of 30. During this period, they could only ask the head of the house, that was to say, their father, for spending money. The same applied even if they were mature adults who were married with children. This was why Hilma invited these people to parties at this mansion. Hilma provided drink, women and drugs, all the while whispering sweet nothings into their ears designed to play on their pride. She allowed them to meet others in the same situations as themselves to build a sense of closeness. Hilma would entertain them and build friendly relations with them. Once these nobles inherited the estate, it was time for her to reap the harvest. If they dared sever ties with her, she would make sure they suffered for it. If they helped her out, she would reward them. In this way, she made further inroads into noble society. She walked along the quiet hallway, looking for water to drink. Silence was not a bad thing. She preferred the quiet to the noise of people. Though she did not show it on her face, she was actually very annoyed when she had to drink and hobnob with the nobles. However, the present circumstances were far too abnormal. This dead silence made her hair stand on end, and it even made her feel that she was the only person in this mansion. What's going on? It was impossible that even the guards had left their post without telling Hilma. She wanted to shout for someone, but if something abnormal had happened, it would be a very bad idea to let the enemy know where she was. She also considered just going back to her room and burrowing under her covers, but she might simply be awaiting her execution. People who don't move when they have to become food for others. This was a belief she subscribed to, and by adhering to that principle, she had risen from a high-class hooker to where she was now. She checked both sides of the empty corridor several times, and only moved ahead after verifying that there really was nobody there. Trusting in her sixth sense, she headed towards a secret room which only she and a few others knew. There were several magic items and gems there, as well as an escape tunnel. This might have been her home base in the royal capital, but she had several other safe houses in the city itself. Perhaps she ought to flee there. As she tiptoed along the hallway, Hilma realized something was off. What is this? The whisper escaped her mouth unbidden. Hilma had discovered the oddity outside the window. The window, made of sheets of thin glass, were covered in several layers of vines. As a result, almost no light could get in. She tried to open the window but it would not budge. She hurriedly studied the other windows along the hallways. Each of them was choked with vines. What happened? Who could have? The windows were most definitely not like this before she had gone to bed. This could not have happened naturally in the space of an hour. That being the case, it was probably the work of magic. Who could have done this, and what was their aim? She had no idea about those points. Even so, she understood that her situation was very dire. Damn it. She cursed, and then she jogged ahead. She no longer cared about how her robe swayed here and there. All she wanted was to get into her secret room. She reached the staircase and looked down. It was still silent. Navigating by what little light managed to filter through the vines, she carefully descended the stairs. At the same time, she was grateful to the thick carpeting for masking her footsteps. When she reached the first floor, she was so shocked that she suddenly sucked in a lungful of cold air. There was a person in the hallway staring at her. That person seemed to blend into the shadows as it stood there, but it was not because they had shadow-melding abilities like thieves or other related jobs. Rather, it felt that way because of their dark skin, which gave the wrong impression. That was a dark elf, and their mismatched eyes seemed to sparkle against the black cloth wrapping them. The dark elf let the black cloth wrapping them fall to the ground. Below it was girl's clothing. She held a black-colored magic staff, and she looked up to Hilma. The secret room was behind this mysterious girl. As she recalled the inner layout of the mansion, Hilma steeled herself and nervously approached her. If only she were a playmate brought along by some noble. However, Hilma immediately discarded her naive conjecture. When she heard that Coco Doll had been captured, she had prepared to flee to a safe place to hide since she did not know how the higher UPS would react. Under these circumstances, there was no way her people would bring in outsiders, or fail to report such a thing to her. Say, little girl, after calling out, Hilma wrinkled her brows in suspicion. She had seen all sorts of people in her past profession, as a high-class prostitute. Her experience told her that this was not a girl, but a boy. Her clothes were exquisite and not the sort which ordinary people could afford. For all Hilma knew, even she might not have something of that quality. The Dark Elves had once lived in the great forest of Tob, and they were practically non-existent in the kingdom. Yet here was one now, wearing expensive clothes intended for another gender. If not for the sinister atmosphere, Hilma would have concluded that this child was a slave to satisfy some noble's degenerate lust. Hey boy, what are you doing here? She approached slowly and carefully, trying not to arouse his suspicion. Auntie, are you the most important person in this place? She was not displeased to be called an auntie. To a young dark elf like him, women of her age were probably all aunties. No, she stopped halfway. She had a bad feeling about this. To date, she had relied on her instincts more than anything else. She had always believed that her instincts were superior than common sense. Where common sense might have betrayed her, only her intuition had never failed her. Yes. That's right. I'm the most important person in this mansion. Is that so? That's good then. The boy smiled. His smile was so pure that even under the present circumstances, it almost managed to ignite the desire to defile his purity within Hilma's heart. Well, I asked those people, and they told me that too. As if in response to the boy, a nearby door opened. A girl slowly stepped out from within. She looked like a girl wearing some kind of bizarre-made uniform, but what surrounded her was not the scent of perfume, but the stink of blood and gore. Hilma covered her mouth and swallowed a scream. The maid's lovely little hand clutched a man's arm. It looked like she had ripped it from his shoulder socket, given the torn fibers of muscle. What's she? It seems someone wanted to attack this mansion, so we decided to finish up some things before those people came. Therefore, I asked her to come along. Please pay me no heed. It has been so long since I ate my fill, and I am very satisfied. She was able to address Hilma without moving her mouth. That was quite strange, but there were more pressing questions than that. What made Hilma shudder was the question of what exactly she had eaten to fill herself up. She could guess, but she did not want to believe. With those thoughts in her heart, she asked them. Then what? What about me? Are you going to eat me too? No. You have other uses, Auntie. She could not relax. That was because her intuition told her that a more horrific fate awaited her. Then how about this, my boy? Want to have some fun with me? She let the clothes draped over her body slide from her shoulder. This was her body, her pride and joy. When she had still been a courtesan, it would have cost a fortune just to spend the night with her. After that, she had kept any excess fat off her frame, and maintained her sensuous figure. She was confident that she could fill anyone with all-consuming lust for her, even if her target was a child. However, there did not seem to be any unusual emotions in the boy's eyes. She could admit that her charms were inferior to that maid over there. Even so, she had been a pro, despite the fact that she was retired. Even if he did not swing that way, she could still arouse him. She elegantly worked her body in a serpentine fashion, and slowly drew close, careful not to alarm him. She could not sense anything like desire from the boy, therefore, she chose another course of action. She slowly extended a hand and put it around the boy's neck, and activated a magic item. It was the viper tattoo. The tattooed snakes on both her hands came to life, raised their heads, and sprang out to bite the boy's body. Anyone bitten by the serpents, and their powerful neurotoxic venom, would die in spastic twitches. This was the ace in the hole for Hilma. One did not otherwise have a way to fight. However, the boy nimbly extended a hand and seized the whip-like snake as it struck, then proceeded to crush the life out of it without hesitation. The viper tattoo whooshed back onto Hilma's arms. Since the summoned snake had been killed, the tattoo could not be reactivated for a full day until it recovered. Hilma was now in the worst-case scenario of having initiated hostilities, and having nothing to show for it, and so she stumbled back unsteadily. However, what most frightened her was the fact that the boy's expression had not changed at all during this string of events. He was not worried at being attacked, and neither did he show any hostility. Then, so let's go. Go where? Just as Hilma began to wonder about his words, intense pain shot through her kneecap at that very same moment. The unbearable pain left her unable to stand and she collapsed to the ground. Abbeth! She wailed in anguish, breaking out in a cold sweat, because of the pain, and then she looked down at her knee. She then regretted doing so. My leg. The kneecap of her left leg was twisted in the other direction, and bone protruded from her blood red, from her flesh. Hilma wept and made to squeeze her leg, which was in unbelievable agony. However, she hesitated. She did not dare touch it. The boy grabbed Hilma by the hair, and then walked out. Hilma was dragged away by an arm strength that she could never have guessed it from the way he looked. Dozens of hair strands were wrenched out with a quiet snapping sound, but the boy did not seem to care. It hurts. It hurts so much. Don't do this. In response to Hilma's wailing, the boy merely glanced at her, but did not halt his pace. I have to hurry up and get there. Part 2 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 4th day 2220. Having completed the attack on the mansion, Entoma Vasilisa Zeta headed outside. She peeled a paper strip off her leg, wadded it up and threw it into the depths of the building. The original plan was to wipe out all the humans within the mansion, recover all important documents and valuables, and then retreat. If possible, they should try to avoid leaving any traces behind, but they did not have the time to sort the gathered information, so they ended up taking whatever they saw, and it looked like they had finished robbing an empty house. However, that itself was not a problem. That was because Demiurge, who had sent Entoma and Mare here, had indicated that a development like this was a possibility. The problem was more that they had exceeded the allotted time by too much. Mare and the demons who had accompanied her were no longer here. Mare had taken the most important person in this mansion to the rendezvous point. The vassal demons had departed this place with the reason they had exceeded their time, piles of goods. Indeed. The reason why their timing was completely off was because they had discovered a basement while they were retreating. And that basement was piled high with contraband items and forbidden drugs. The task of recovery had proceeded slowly. To begin with, there were several underground rooms heaped high with miscellaneous items, and the high-value items were salted and concealed among the dross. As the saying went, the best place to hide a tree was in a forest. Even Entoma and the demons could not have brought all the goods away with them, and so they had to sift through said forest for the trees in question. Perhaps it might have been resolved faster if the human which Mare had taken away was still around. However, it was too late to say that now. Entoma and the demons decided to inspect each and every item, and they threw everything they judged as worthless into a room. This was a tedious task for the gathering party, whose strength far exceeded those of human beings. However, their hard work had paid off, and they had recovered everything valuable from the basement. As the person in charge, Entoma had stayed behind until the end. With the attitude only found on those who had completed a great labor, she looked up at the night sky and made to wipe the sweat off her brow. In truth, she had not sweated at all, she only felt like she had. All right then, hurry up and move it all, everyone. In accordance with Entoma's orders, the insects, which were bigger than a man, took wing into the night sky, carrying a large quantity of cargo. These giant beetles had been summoned by Entoma's entomancer abilities. The insects flew straight toward the prearranged meeting point, their wings making a deep bass sound as they flapped. Entoma watched the insects move the cargo, and she remembered that she was still holding something. Ah, I haven't eaten it yet. How silly of me, how silly. She playfully knuckled her own head, and then brought the severed man's arm under her jaw. There was a shaka-shaka noise as the flesh of the man's arm was torn away. Entoma's throat moved in time with the sound. Then, with a cute erp, the stench of blood spread through the air. While the fat of women's meat makes it tender, and children's meat tastes good despite having less fat, eating the meat of a muscular man is best when trying to lose weight. She deftly avoided the bones, and once she was done, she chucked the rest of the arm into the mansion. Thank you for having me. She bowed to the building, and finally made to go to the point her superiors had ordered her to travel to. However, she had only taken a few steps, when someone called out to her and stopped her in her tracks. Yo, this is a pretty nice night. Is it? I don't think it's nice for you at all, is it? Entoma had trouble telling whether the human who was slowly emerging was male or female. It seemed female, but judging by its muscular frame, it also seemed male. What are you doing in a place like this? Taking a walk. What were you eating so happily just now? Meat. Human meat? Yup. Human meat. The man-woman's tone was icy cold, but it did not bother Entoma at all. She did not care at all how humans felt. If they got in the way, she would trample them. If they stayed out of the way, she would ignore them. If she was hungry, she would capture and eat them. It would be strange if she was actually concerned about such beings. I see. So the monster makes an appearance. I didn't expect 8 fingers to rear such monsters. But by the looks of things, they didn't train you up properly. The man-woman slowly raised its spiked warhammer. As Entoma saw this, exasperation crept into her tone for the first time. I say. Could we just pretend we didn't see each other? A strange expression appeared on the man-woman's face. It probably had not expected the person opposite it to say something like that. You see, I came here to work too, and dealing with you would be very annoying. The most important thing is that right now, my tummy's stuffed fit to burst. Sorry, but I'm one of the top adventurers in the kingdom. I can't let a man-eating monster go just like that. Besides, leaving something like you in the world would cause me a lot of problems. What a pain. Still, you say you're strong, huh? In that case, I'll use you as emergency rations, then. Entoma looked directly at the man-woman for the first time. It appeared to be a pure warrior. It ought to be pretty strong. Entoma was not a pure warrior, and so she could not estimate her opponent's strength. However, she did not feel that her adversary was stronger than her. Ye art. The man-woman ran at Entoma. Then it raised its spiked warhammer high and smashed down at her. Entoma gracefully evaded that blow. However, her opponent refused to let up and suddenly changed the direction of its swing, bringing the warhammer at her in a murderous blow. That was not a graceful movement utilizing centrifugal force, but using brute muscle power to forcefully change the direction of the strike. Entoma evaded once more, and then activated a skill. Is running all you can do? The man-woman swung its warhammer at Entoma, and the gale in the wake of its blow whipped past her head, stirring the strands of her fake hair. You really like swinging wildly, don't you? Her mockery was met by the clicking of a tongue. Entoma used her skill once more, and at the same time she easily avoided the plunging smash of the spiked warhammer. Having missed its target, the hammer crashed into the ground with all the force which had been meant for her. Entoma sneered at her opponent's simple, repetitive attacks. Her face did not change at all. However, her opponent could keenly sense the mockery coming from her as they fought. However, Entoma then realized in the next moment that her opponent was waiting for this, for the hubris that only the overwhelmingly powerful possessed. Break. The earth shattered where the spiked warhammer had struck it. No, the stone floor had shattered. It was like a localized earthquake. For the first time, Entoma lost her footing. In contrast, her opponent had used some kind of magic item to remain as stately as a mountain. Entoma watched as her opponent raised its warhammer once more, its head stained with dirt and debris. I underestimated my opponent. Entoma scolded herself. Evading that move was easy enough. Indeed, if she had been human, she would have lost her balance when her footing was destroyed, and the shockwave of the ground fragmenting under her feet would have reached her legs and acted as another set of shackles to bind her in place, making escape very difficult. However, Entoma was one of the Pleiades battle maids, and the magic items she wore were all of superior quality. Such conditions did not bother her in the slightest. There was only one problem. She would have to jump in order to evade, but that would dirty the maid uniform she wore. Would such a thing be permitted? This was a rare and precious treasure handed down to Entoma from the supreme beings. That was enough, no more playing around. For the first time, there was genuine hostility on Entoma's face under the mask. No more playing around. I'll kill it. Entoma turned to face the falling spiked warhammer, and raised her left arm. She no longer felt like a human flicking away a bug, but the actual desire to kill. Perhaps it would be different if she were a floor guardian, but for someone of Entoma's level, it would be very difficult to survive unscathed if she were to block that attack with her defenseless left arm. In the very next moment, what rang out was not the sound of steel pulping flesh, but two hard objects colliding. At this moment, a shield clung to Entoma's left arm. Clung was not a metaphorical term. An insect with over 8 legs gripped Entoma's arm tightly, and refused to let go. What's that? You see, I'm an entomancer. So I can call out bugs like this and command them as I like. She waved her right hand and out of the night flew a long insect shaped like a broadsword, which attached itself to the back of her right hand. This is a sword bug and this is a shield bug. I've decided that I'm going to kill you. I hadn't intended to take your life at first, but now you cannot be spared. Entoma advanced on her opponent and slashed at it. She ripped through the man-woman's breastplate and fresh blood fountained out. However, it was not a fatal blow by any means. Her opponent had not been able to avoid a serious attack from Entoma, but she had only been lightly wounded. It would seem calling itself one of the top adventurers in the kingdom was not pride, or exaggeration. However, if that was all she had, she was not worthy to be Entoma's opponent. She was not a pure fighter like Yuri Alpha, but Entoma Vasilisa Zeta was still a member of the Pleiades, and she possessed power entirely incomparable to that of mankind. She swung again, and blood spurted once more, splashing her face. Thanks to the injury she had taken just now, this wound was deeper than the last, and it could no longer be considered light. You actually changed your movements on me. Did you get serious? The spiked warhammer fell on Entoma with a furious cry, and Entoma deflected it with her shield bug. She felt a tremendous impact race through her, but she stood firm, determined not to budge so much as a step. In truth, nothing would have happened if she did move, but this was an expression of her pride, and her determination to not move for a mere human being. The man-woman rode on the flow of battle, continuing her fluid combination of attacks. Her fast and furious assault was most likely augmented by the martial arts, which were unique to this world. However, Entoma skillfully used her shield bug and her sword bug to block the series of 15 continuous attacks without so much as a scratch. Entoma did not know that this was the trump card of Blue Rose's Gagaran, her super combo made by simultaneously activating many martial arts. Each hit of that crashing wave of attacks was made with all the strength her steely arms could produce, and they could even break through the fortress martial art. Only the defensive technique known as invulnerable fortress, which only a few geniuses could master, could hope to fully defend against it. However, Entoma's innate muscle power had blocked every single strike. This was the disparity in their levels, the overwhelming difference in the physical abilities of their respective species. The beginning of despair began to appear in her opponent's eyes, but Entoma felt nothing for it. All she wanted was to kill her adversary. Pua! She heard what sounded like a swimmer gasping for air as their head crested the water's surface. The combination attack had also stopped. Entoma cocked her right hand, the one with the sword bug, back like she was drawing a bow, and then stabbed forward like loosing an arrow. She was aiming for the chest of the man-woman. Her foe raised its warhammer, but it was too slow. Entoma's strike was faster than it, and it pierced its chest, or at least, that should have been the case. The thrust missed. The insect blade struck nothing but the night air. Entoma's head swiveled. She wanted to see who had interfered with her attack. There was a black-clad woman several meters